right, so the next topic that we have to talk about is given two lines determining if the slopes are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So the first thing that we want to do is talk about what is parallel, what is perpendicular, and what does neither look like. Then we'll talk about how we can find if two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Let's start with parallel lines. Now, parallel lines are two lines that will never intersect. So if you had a visual, you would have a slope that would look like this and like this. See how they're both positive? Okay? So anytime that you have two lines that are parallel, they have to have the same slope. So not only do they have to have the same sign, but they also have to have the same number. They have to be identical. See how these two lines never intersect? They keep the same equal space, but notice that they both have positive slopes, and if you actually calculate them, they would have the same numbers. Let's give you a visual of what perpendicular looks like. So you can see perpendicular are two lines that intersect and they have to intersect at 90-degree angles. See this little box that I made here? That's a right angle box. Basically this is saying that this is 90-degree angle. If it does not intersect at 90 degrees, but it does intersect, then it would be neither. Now, notice one slope has to be negative and the other slope has to be positive, okay? So they always have to be inverses of each other. So they have to have opposite signs. There's only one exception to that rule, is when you have a slope that's undefined and that you have a slope that is 0. They don't have opposite signs, but they are perpendicular. And that's because one of the slopes are undefined. But all other cases, you'll have opposite signs. So see how this has a positive slope? See how this has a negative slope? And they actually have to be reciprocal of each other. Now what do I mean by reciprocal? If I said that this slope was 2/3, then this slope has to be not only opposite signs, but reciprocal. Flip the fraction. 3/2. If you multiply the two slopes, you'll always get a negative 1. It will always equal negative 1. So if I took negative 3/2 times by positive 2/3, you know a negative times a positive is negative. And then 3/2 times 2/3 would be 6/6, or 1. So you would get negative 1. Okay? So again, parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. They will have the same slope, identical. Same sign, same number. For perpendicular, you have to have two slopes that have to have one opposite sign, so one positive and one negative, and they have to be reciprocal of each other. Any other type would be considered neither. I'll just give you a picture of what neither would look like. This would be considered neither, because you can see that they're not the same slope because they're intersecting. Notice this slope is increasing, and this slope is also increasing. They're not opposite of each other. It's not that one's increasing and the other one is decreasing. So we know that this is not 90 degrees, so this is neither. Okay? So with those three pictures, let's talk about if I give you two slopes. By looking at the slopes, can you determine are they parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Not that you have pictures, but they just give you the slope. So let's say for line 1, the slope was 2. And let's say for here, for line 2, the slope is 2. Notice these are the same slopes. So once you see that you have two slopes that are the same, identical, we can tell that this is parallel, because we told you that if they're the same, both signs and numbers, they're parallel. Now what happens if we have a slope that is negative 3/4, and then line 2, the slope is 4/3. By looking at the slopes, you can see that they're opposite signs, one has a positive, one has a negative, and that they're reciprocal each other. Or if you multiply them, negative 3/4 times 4/3, this times this is 12. This times this is 12. Negative times a positive is negative. You can see this will reduce to negative 1. So since they're opposite signs but reciprocal of each other, we would know this is perpendicular. Now, what happens if you have a slope you can see, even though they have the same signs, they don't have the same numbers. So automatically, you can eliminate that they're parallel. Then you look at that and you go like, they're not even reciprocal of each other. If you're not sure what reciprocal is, I always tell people, first look to see if the two slopes are identical. If they are equal, then stop, say it's parallel. If the two slopes are not the same, Then multiply the two. -3 times -2. If your answer is a -1, stop and say it's perpendicular. If you multiply the two slopes and you get any other number besides -1, then you have neither. Okay. Let's just do one more comparison. That's slope 1. That's slope 2. Now you look at them and you ask yourself, are the slopes identical? We know that 3/2 is not the same thing as a -6/9. They don't even have the same sign. Now ask yourself, are they perpendicular? Be careful. Perpendicular, some people say, oh, the reciprocal of this is 9/6. This is not 9/6, so it's neither. But here's the trick. You gotta make sure slope is always reduced. If you didn't realize that this is not reduced, you won't pick up that this is actually perpendicular. But you could always take slope 1 times slope 2 to see if it equaled -1. Negative times positive is a negative. 6 times 3 is 18. 9 times 2 is 18. You can see -18 divided by 18 is a -1. This is technically perpendicular. You might not have seen it because you might not have seen that this could reduce down to -2/3. Now you can see that they're reciprocal. So be careful. If you don't reduce, maybe get in the habit of multiplying both slopes to see if you get -1. So as long as you see the two slopes are identical, you can always say parallel. If the two slopes are opposite signs and reciprocal, you can see perpendicular. Or multiply the two slopes. If you multiply the two slopes and you always get a -1, then it's perpendicular. If you multiply the two slopes and you get any other number besides -1 and the two don't match, then you can say it's neither.